Welcome to Brave Together podcast, an empowering resource for the parents of children with disabilities, neurodivergence, and all unique needs.
As a parent, you want to problem solve. You want to get them the solution as soon as possible, but you kind of have to learn by living through it, and that involves a little bit of patience maybe until your child is ready to actually get that help.
Hi, Bravies. It's Jessica Pate here, brave mom and the founder of We Are Brave Together. And today it's a party because Susanna Peace-Lavelle and Dr. Zoe Shaw will also be joining this conversation with our guest. On this episode, number 225, we are hearing about the experience of a thriving neurodivergent adult. Carrie Berk is a journalist and author of over 20 children's books, and she's an influencer whose new book, MINDFIRE, Diary of an Anxious Twentysomething, illuminates the wild ride she has taken, coming of age with an extra anxious brain. Carrie was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, and OCD at 18, but that's not when her mental health journey started. In this conversation, she delves into so many important topics, including the misconceptions surrounding OCD and the role we as parents can play in supporting our children's mental health, and what it feels like to be mentally struggling and not know why. Here's a quick reminder to please rate and review this podcast, share episodes with your friends, follow us on social media, and check out our episodes posted weekly on our We Are Brave Together YouTube channel. I really think you're going to get so much out of this conversation. Carrie does a great job telling it like it is and helping us as parents know what it feels like to be on the other side of our attempts to help. Now, enjoy my conversation with the courageous Carrie Berk. Hi, Carrie. Welcome to Brave Together podcast. We are dying to talk to you today.
So excited to chat.
So I've marked up your book. This is fantastic. It's so compelling. It's reading your journal. How did you shift from writing all the, 21 children's books to then writing MINDFIRE? Let's start there.
Well, it came out of my solo debut book that I published in 2023, which was my real-life rom-com. That was kind of my first departure from children's books where I was really getting into my personal life. It was memoir style. I was talking about dating experiences, what people can learn from them, and kind of just getting deep and talking about things that might be taboo among people my age, which are dating and relationships and breakups. And one of the things I mentioned in that book is self-love and how you can't love anyone until you love yourself. And people really resonated with that message. I shared a little bit about my anxiety and OCD in the last chapter of my real-life rom-com. And I got a lot of messages from people saying that they wanted to learn more. And that's something that really resonated with them. So eventually, I kind of took a step back. I read some of the journals that I had written when I was going through my anxiety and OCD in 2020. And I realized that if I put these together and kind of expanded upon them, it would make a really beautiful book that could serve as a really helpful tool for a lot of people out there.
And are so many people reaching out to you who suffer with OCD and anxiety?
I've gotten such a variety of messages from people who are going through it themselves to parents who have children who are going through it and saying that they feel heard for the first time and they were worried about their child and they read this, and not only can it make their child feel less alone, but they feel less alone now. So I've gotten a variety of lots of people reaching out to me, and it's really helpful because it's scary to talk about these very intimate topics. And I did it because I felt like I had this greater purpose and responsibility to represent my generation and so many people who are going through anxiety and OCD. So to get that response from people is really validating.
I have a question. I'm not super familiar with OCD. I know that it stands for obsessive compulsive disorder, and I know that it can show up for different people differently. And I'm just curious how you would define it and how it shows up for you.
Yeah, so we see it in the media most frequently as cleaning and organization. For me, I was not that really at all. I was 8 years old when I first started showing symptoms of OCD, and everything had to be even on both sides. So if I touched something with my right hand, I had to touch it with my left hand. It's kind of cookie cutter OCD. And that kind of faded. And when I was 18, I started obsessing over this really dark thought. I was at a pumpkin patch with my friend, and she revealed to me that she'd cut her wrists, and I was suffering from anxiety at the time. And I just latched onto this thought that if I had anxiety and she had anxiety, that I was destined for the same type of doom as her. And I would obsess over this thought. I would compulsively tell myself over and over again why it wasn't true, why I wanted to live. And I was just stuck inside my mind all day long. That's the type of OCD that a lot of people don't talk about because it's taboo, because they don't want to be misunderstood. If I came out and said, I'm having intrusive thoughts about self-harm, people, their first reaction might be, oh, this person just is suicidal. Like, let's send her away somewhere. But there's a difference between intrusive thoughts about suicide and like actually being suicidal. And Zoe, I'm sure, can speak to that as the doctor here, the expert.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're differentiating, but as you talk about that, children don't have words for what they're experiencing, and even adolescents, we don't have, there's TikTok, and so they're starting to have these titles, but still no real understanding of what they are. And so even for a parent, what would you tell a parent that they could look for? If you think back to when you were, a kid and you were experiencing all these things, probably with no real titles or language for them either, what could your parents have seen that could have helped you?
So I actually made up a name for it when I was younger. I called it Kwa Kwa because it felt so silly to me, and I came up with a silly name to represent it. And my mom was familiar with Kwa Kwa, but I don't think I fully expressed the extent of my struggling because I was really embarrassed. So I wish back then that as a parent, we were living under the same roof. She could have seen the fact that, I may have been spending a little too much time in my room before bed doing random stuff. Like I was touching my nightstand like multiple times and I wasn't going to bed on time. My light was still on. Like really small things that kind of went on for a long time. And then in terms of in 2020, I think my parents did a really good job in just getting me help when I asked for it. They didn't need to fully understand OCD or what I was going through. It was as simple as, I feel really bad today. My heart's beating really fast. I can't get out of my head. I need help. And even though they might not know exactly what I'm going through, they provided that avenue for me to get the help I need.
Wow.
Did you feel like your parents responded to you in the way that you needed, Carrie?
Well, I think they were scared, and rightfully so. I don't blame them for being scared. I was scared. When you see your child walking around crying all the time, saying that she can't stop thinking about self-harm, of course they're going to be scared. They were learning just as much as I was learning. We did this thing in OCD. There's something called exposure therapy, where you expose yourself to your intrusive thoughts and say them out loud to yourself, no matter how taboo they might be. And one of my exposures was I had to say these words aloud to my parents. I want to hurt myself. I want to self-harm. Like all these thoughts that I didn't align with, but were still in my head. And I said them aloud to my parents, and I had to look them dead in the eye. I could see them tearing up, and it was just the hardest thing ever. But it was a transformative moment because after that exposure therapy session, we had dinner. We watched a movie, we woke up the next morning, and we went about our day as normal. Life went on despite the intrusive thoughts. So it taught all of us that your mind could be telling you whatever it wants, no matter how dark or taboo, but it doesn't necessarily mean the thoughts hold any truth. And I think we all learned that together. And once we all kind of realized that, they were able to support me and listen whenever I needed a listening ear, because sometimes that's all you need to provide as a parent. You might not fully understand, but just simply sitting there and listening to your child when they're saying they're struggling can be so helpful.
What a powerful exercise.
So difficult, though.
I was listening to you share that as if you were my daughter sharing that with me. I was imagining that scenario. And I'm curious, so what was the road like leading up to, because I think you were diagnosed at 18, right? With OCD officially. And so I'm curious about the journey and the road leading up to that official diagnosis, and then also how anxiety was sort of interwoven into the mix.
Yeah. So between age 8 and 18, it wasn't really prominent. I had that brief spike of OCD for a year when I was 8, didn't know what it was, just shook it off, let it go. And then in between those years, I had little signs here and there. I was very obsessive about getting my sleep. I would start having panic attacks if I didn't go to bed on time. But I just thought that was growing pains. I never went to sleepaway camp for that reason. And I was just kind of a normal kid, like nothing was really happening. And when I was 18, the pandemic hit, obviously, huge anxiety spike at that time. The data numbers are absolutely staggering if you look at them. But I was class of 2020. I didn't have a prom or graduation, and I didn't really feel the gravity of that until one night I was at home and just had a panic attack. Couldn't catch my breath. I started like excessively sweating and shaking, and that just continued for about a week straight. I went to get a COVID test because I didn't really understand what was going on. I thought it was COVID at the time. It was negative, and that's when my mom introduced the concept of anxiety, and I had to just learn from ground zero because I was not taught anything about anxiety in school. I just thought it was the same thing as stress, like the butterfly feeling you get before a test. I didn't understand how much it could really cut into your everyday life until I was barely functioning.
Right. So what would you tell a young person? Okay, what I hear you talking about, that sounds like stress. That doesn't sound like full-blown anxiety, or even vice versa. Like, I think you're minimizing that. This sounds like full-blown anxiety. You're not just experiencing a little bit of life stress.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot in my book, stress versus anxiety, and acknowledging that there is a distinction. So stress, there's a few things. I think stress often has an explicit trigger. I'm feeling stressed because I have a test coming up. I'm feeling stressed because I have a job interview. Like a lot of the times we can tie stress to something and it goes away once that event is done. Like it's the lead up to something, the event happens, okay, stress goes down. It's kind of short. Anxiety can be a little bit more prolonged and all-consuming, in my opinion, and it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a specific event. So we could say that me being class of 2020 was tied to my anxiety, but it wasn't like I was sitting there ruminating all day long, woe is me, I'm class of 2020, my life sucks. Like that wasn't the reality of it. I was just living, eating, sleeping, breathing as an 18-year-old girl going through a pandemic. And that was, I guess, an explanation for having anxiety.
Right. But the anxiety, like you said, it's not attached to anything specific. And so sometimes even for the person, it can feel very ambiguous and you don't know why you're feeling this way. Well, you're stressed, you have a test tomorrow, or, you have all these things that are overwhelming you. But sometimes when you feel anxiety, you have no idea why you have these feelings. And that creates anxiety in and of itself, right? And so it can be this spiral.
And then you become anxious over being anxious, which is the worst part. Like you can feel anxious and then your anxiety goes away and you anticipate something's coming up and you're like, oh no, I'm worried about feeling anxious again. And the cycle starts all over again, which can be super difficult.
So when your parents were awakened to, what you're going through and how you were suffering or tormented by intrusive thoughts and anxiety and OCD, speaking as a parent, I know that it's hard. It's its own version of hell and heartbreak to watch your child suffer with mental health struggles. How did your parents keep their own anxiety, and fears and worry at bay so that they're responding to you in a way that's not out of that fear and anxiety? Or did they struggle with that? I struggle with that,
So it was tough because I wanted to open up to my parents about anxiety, but I didn't want it to be all that they think about as it was all that I thought about. Like I would not wish that on my worst enemy. So a lot of it I kept to myself and I reserved for my therapy sessions. And I think compartmentalizing that was very important. I knew my parents were there if I needed to talk, but I also wanted to protect them in a way. And I obviously love them both so much and I did not want to see them suffer the way that I was suffering. So I was very careful in oversharing, which can be a huge problem in OCD with confessions and sharing every single dark thought that pops into your mind. Every time you get an intrusive thought, even if it's the same thing, telling someone in your life, oh, I had that intrusive thought again. Oh, I'm thinking about self-harm again. Oh, for the second day in a row, for the third day in a row. I did that for a while because that I felt like was the only way to alleviate the OCD, but I saw the way it was affecting my parents, where they were visibly upset. They were constantly checking in on me, and that wasn't helping anyone because A, they were upset, and B, every time they checked for the anxiety, I would find something there. When you check for your anxiety, it will be there. It was just not helping anyone, and it was a learning curve for all of us, but I feel like we've come to a place where I know now that they're there if I need them, but if I have a spike in anxiety, it's best kept to the professionals who could actually give me valuable advice, and it's literally their job to listen to my woes. My parents did not deserve to be sitting there for hours as I spilled my guts about nonsense and irrational thoughts.
So for a parent, I mean, I'm hearing two things. One is learning to equip your child, right, to be able to manage whatever's going on with them. So that's a mentoring process is to equip your child. And then, of course, the other is to recognize that something's going on and seek help.
Yeah. And a lot of the times your child might be afraid to ask for help. And I think as a parent, you need to practice patience in that case, because you can't necessarily force your child into therapy. When I was going through it at 18, if my mom had come to me prematurely and said, you know what, you should go see a doctor, I would have gotten really mad at her. I was a grumpy teenage girl that just would not have flown by me.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I was suffering and I had to get to a point where it was so bad that I had to be the one to say, I need help. And then she jumped in and got me that help as soon as possible. I think sometimes as a parent, you want to problem solve. You want to get the solution as soon as possible, but you kind of have to learn by living through it. And that involves a little bit of patience, maybe, until your child is ready to actually get that help.
Right. And so as a parent, you know, my first thought is, how do I create that environment so that when they know they'll be okay to come to me. I will have that clear line. Of course, as a parent, my thought also is, but what if they don't know? How don't I need to intervene maybe first, because maybe they're not aware that they really need help? But that might be another question. But at the very least, how do we create that space as a parent? How could your parents, or did they, so that when you knew you needed help, you could go right there and ask?
I think listen, don't pressure them to open up. A lot of the time, my mom tried to relate to me and share her own stories with anxiety, and it was so drastically different from mine that it just made me really pissed off, and I just wanted her to listen. And she didn't understand that for a while, because she just wanted to make me feel better and like be my buddy and relate to me. And I just said to her, Mom, just literally sit and let me talk. And a lot of the times, that's all your kid needs. And then the second part of your question, like interceding before they're ready or like before they know, I think without getting too into the specifics of what they're going through, keeping it as baseline as possible and just checking in with your kid and asking how they're doing and how they're feeling. Are you happy today? Are you sad today? Are you unfocused? I always say when opening up to someone about anxiety for the first time, pretend you're talking the lowest common denominator, put it in words that they can understand. Happy, sad, stressed, unfocused. And it kind of works both ways. You can ask your kid about those emotions, because even if they don't understand anxiety, they understand sad, crying, balling their hands at a fist. Like, put it in terms they can actually vocalize to you without feeling like they're confused or worsening their anxiety.
That's good.
This is so helpful. It's so good. I really wish I would have heard when I was pregnant with my first, listen and validate. Listen and validate. Don't fix. Don't try to make them grateful. Don't try to spin it positive. Like, just listen.
But also, like, don't blame yourself for trying to problem solve. The first time I showed my book to my boyfriend, he read this chapter where I was pointing out something my mom did wrong. And he's like, I don't like that you villainized her here. And I'm like, I'm not villainizing her. I'm pointing out something she did wrong because I want other parents to understand that this is what they need to hear. It might not be what they want to hear, but this is what they need to hear. Like saying these things even aloud to you guys, it might not necessarily be the most comfortable to hear as moms, to take a step back, to let your kids struggle through it. But that's what they need. They're growing into adults, and if we're going to teach them to better equip their anxiety, then they're going to need to grapple with it a little bit. They're going to need to come to that conclusion themselves if they're struggling, that they need help, that they want to ask you for help. That's how you're going to become that confidant for them, not by pushing and pushing and pushing and trying to get them to open up to you.
That's so good.
Preach. So good.
Because I'm thinking of how supportive you can be to my 18-year-old daughter who is almost 19. Her name is Arizona. And she will often, I have suffered from anxiety. I have generalized anxiety disorder. I've had it my entire life. I'm anxious about so many different things. I've had panic attacks my whole life. There was never a label until later on when I, hit rock bottom. So I appreciate that you shared that it had to get so bad that you actually had to ask for help. Like, I find that to be such an opportunity for us, even though it's so hard and so uncomfortable and just painful. But I'm wondering, how can my daughter, because she would respond to you so much more than she would respond to old, wrinkly mommy, which is what she called me. And not on, yes, mommy, your neck is so wrinkled. I know. I know. Your hair is so great. I know. You're the reason why. No, but so she's not on TikTok. She's not on Instagram. I'm going to share with her your book, maybe. I just need to, read through every single word I don't know. But how can do you have YouTube videos? What other sort of resources and support do you offer? Younger girls, she would just absolutely glom onto you. No question.
Yeah. So I'm on social media. That's my main jam. My entire platform is not mental health because I don't want to make it my entire personality because it's not. It's a part of my life, but it's not all I am. So I share my life and I also share mental health moments on my social media. But beyond that, I'm not a doctor or a scientist or anything like that. I don't offer counseling services. I did study that in school. I studied journalism. I'm a journalist. I'm a writer. So this book is really my love letter to Gen Z to make them feel heard. So I think the best way to reach her and to make her feel heard is through MINDFIRE. And also, I'll note it's not just for Gen Z. I feel like this book is so helpful for parents too. And I'm realizing that more and more with the amount of people who are reaching out to me that are parents, not just kids, but majority parents who are having their eyes opened. I know when my dad read this, he called me and he said his first reaction was, I feel bad I wasn't there for you more. And I said, you have no idea how helpful you were. He's like, I feel like I didn't recognize it. And I said, you being normal throughout all of it and being that grounding force and almost pretending like nothing was happening when it felt like my mind was on fire, it helped bring me back to reality and made me feel present again. So I told him, I'm like, you have no idea how helpful you were during that time. And yeah, he just read that book and I felt bad because he felt bad.
I would love to switch gears a little bit, and I would just love to hear, how do you show love and self-compassion to yourself? How do you practice that? What does that look like for you?
I mean, it's different for everyone. For me, I'm a big runner. I'm very outspoken about that. Nothing makes me feel better than when I go out on a run, and especially a long run. I just feel so self-confident, and that's the way I show love to myself, by moving my body. And on top of that, just doing things I'm passionate about, writing, spending time with my boyfriend, going out to dinner with my family, all the little things I feel like that make up my everyday that bring me joy and that I'm passionate about, bring me self-love.
And is there any sort of practice when you start to spin again or have a moment or have a day? Is there something that you do to interrupt that, to short circuit? Does it does it freak you out? Like, oh no, here I go. Or, oh, I see that coming. I hear those thoughts. Now this is what I'm going to do. Like, how do you approach it now?
It's not as bad as it used to. I think for intrusive thoughts, I've learned to live with them as they've changed. Panic attacks are a little harder to manage because they're physical, and getting yourself to calm down your breathing all by yourself is easier said than done. I usually go out on a run to fix it, but I've had a lot of panic attacks during runs. I'm writing an article about it coming up, panic attacks during runs. But I would just say in those moments, my go-to is using my 5 senses. So naming 5 things I see around me, things I see, things I hear, just to bring myself back to my surroundings. After I do that, then moving my body, whether it's going on a run or riding my Peloton bike. So I'm at home and I can hop off when needed. That's really helpful. I like connecting to other people, calling a friend or sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. I think that's most important for me. I know a lot of people like to be alone in those moments and kind of wallow in it, but I just like to kind of turn that pain into productivity and be as normal as possible and almost force myself into things before I'm ready in order to pull myself out of the panic.
Oh, good. I wish I had MINDFIRE when I was growing up. I mean, I really, really do. It would make me feel so much less isolated. Yeah, you do too. Well, it's like we teach what we most need to learn sometimes, and I just love how you have been able to name at such a young age, really at age 22, of like, here are the resources and tools and support that are going to be supportive for me and in my physical body and my emotional body. That is beautiful. And I know things are always shifting and changing. This is a journey. It's a process. Talk to you in 3 years and, you might have another set of, that's the thing. It's like this big Crayola box of not just 8 crayons or 24 or 64. Now they have like these big boxes of, right? So I acknowledge you for speaking up about it and being so transparent and also for doing the work. I mean, whew, yeah, amazing.
What I want to do now, I don't necessarily have any plans to release any more books. MINDFIRE was kind of spontaneous. I was in between graduating college and getting my full-time job, and I just needed a passion project. So no plans to write another book, but I think the next thing I want to do in the next line of work is incorporating mental health into my journalism wherever possible. So instead of just telling my story, telling other people's stories. And in the line of work I'm in right now, it's hard because I'm covering like celebrity news, and it can be very, very like smoke and mirrors. But whenever news breaks about someone going through something with mental health, I'm the first person to try and jump on that and shed light on that. And Madison Beer the other day said she had depression, I think. And I was really honored to write that story up because it's someone who's around my age, who's going through the same thing, who has a following, and to be able to shed light on that and show people out there that you can be successful and also be struggling at the same time, I think is a really important message.
It is such an important message. And how do you feel on the path to destigmatization for mental health? Like, where are we at, or what do you think is going to really make a difference in our society and culture?
Yeah, so it's very baseline right now. We see those hashtags, mental health matters. People say, yeah, I have anxiety, as if it's almost like a quirky personality trait. Therapy's kind of thrown around now. It's just a loose term. What we're not talking about are people's specific stories and the stories that aren't being told, like mine. That's why I released MINDFIRE, because I wanted people to understand the parts of anxiety and OCD that aren't necessarily pretty. And I hope that people are able to kind of start opening up and spark conversations by sharing their real stories instead of just reposting a hashtag or a quote or something. But besides that, I feel like there's really a gap in the education system right now when it comes to mental health. I didn't learn about it in school, period. Not in elementary school, not in college. And that's a huge problem, because you're going to have people who turn 18 and have a panic attack for the first time and feel like they're dying and take themselves to a hospital. And I was damn near close, but my mom was there, and I was very lucky I had my mom with me. But there are a lot of kids out there who might not have that support system. And it all starts with the education they're getting and teaching them from a young age feelings, happy, sad, stress in kindergarten, and then gradually introducing what stress might look like, and then teaching people about anxiety, having mandatory mental health classes in high school and college. I had a class, it was a natural science class in college. We had one day dedicated to mental health. I was very intrigued how it was going to go, and it was very disappointing. So basically, they put on the board, there's one slide on OCD. We spent about 60 seconds on it, and they had a stock image of somebody scrubbing a smartboard with a sponge. And I was so furious because the way that this professor described it was cleaning and organization and just being really obsessively clean. And this was in 2022 when I was really in the thick of everything. So I felt really upset and misunderstood. But at the same time, I couldn't blame the professor because he didn't receive the proper education on it either. So we gotta like start as soon as possible incorporating these curriculums so that the cycle ends and we're not spreading misinformation to kids because it can be dangerous.
Right. And I would love the message, besides just educating, also sending the message like, this happens in people, just like diabetes happens in people. And we don't shame anybody for a diabetes diagnosis, so could we please stop doing it? It's not like I didn't pull myself up by my bootstraps strong enough, and so I landed with OCD or anxiety or depression. It's like it happens. It happens in our brains and bodies, and we don't have control, just like we can't necessarily control other, medical diagnoses that come up. So I just wish they could just take away the shame or the darkness surrounding it. Just this happens. This is normal life. Some people experience this. Some people experience that.
Yeah. My mom told me when she was younger that it was even more taboo, that she was never able to go to a therapist. It was where the crazy kids went. They couldn't do that. And the fact that now therapy has become normal is a step in the right direction. But at the same time, her generation, she's in her 50s, a lot of those people in their 50s are college professors, and they have that mindset kind of embedded in them. So they might be spreading that misinformation to kids. So it's a matter of like stopping the cycle and teaching people, not just kids, but teaching adults that mental health is way more wide encompassing than just a hashtag. OCD is not just a sponge or a line of pencils. There's so much more, and there's this huge learning curve, and a lot of people don't want to jump into it because it's so taboo.
Carrie, would you like people to, how people will say, oh, I'm having an OCD moment, or I was just so OCD today and I rearranged my kitchen or whatever. Like, how would you like people who really understand OCD is way more than that to respond? Like, how should we respond to others when people just like flippantly throw it out and it's not true OCD? What would you like us to do?
Buy MINDFIRE by Carrie Berk. No. Literally. I mean, I'm not very confrontational. I don't know if I'm necessarily the right person who will like go up to someone. I'll give you an example. So like I said, I didn't get any mental health education in school. I ran into my former high school guidance counselor, who is like the in-house therapist in school, in 2022. And I was really suffering at the time. And she was in my hair salon and she was sitting next to me. And I knew I wanted to say something. And I was mad. I wanted to say like, you suck. Why didn't you teach me anything? But that's not the type of person I am. So I spun my chair around and I said, I don't know if you remember me. And she was like, yeah, you went to high school. And I'm like, yeah, I went to your high school. Never went to see you. But I just hope you know, we're living in a mental health epidemic right now, and you have a really big responsibility to help students. That's all I said. And she kind of just like, you could see like the look in her eyes. She kind of like got glazed over. Like she didn't know how to respond to that. And she left the salon like a few minutes later without saying goodbye, like totally panicked by that. So I don't know what I would tell someone. I wouldn't necessarily be confrontational though. I think I would say like, there's a lot more to it in a gentle way, like, hey, there's a lot more to it than you might be thinking about. Maybe you should check out MINDFIRE by Carrie Berk.
Yes.
Just like drive that point home.
I love that approach, though. Approach it with like gentleness and even curiosity versus like, you know.
Yeah. I would just be like, don't necessarily grill them for being wrong or say like, what you're saying is totally wrong, because they're not going to respond to whatever you have to say if you introduce it like that. You just say, hey, there's a little more to the story, I think. Check this out. You'd be super interested in it. And like you said, curiosity rather than attack. That's so interesting. I never even thought about that. I don't think I've ever been in a situation where, actually, I take that back. My best friend doesn't respond to my OCD well. She doesn't understand. She doesn't really believe in therapy and mental health and all of that. And whenever she kind of rolls her eyes at me and brings that up,
Yeah.
I have to be gentle with her and say, I kind of laugh and I'm like, come on, like, there's more to the story. Like, you should read my book. And then she pushes back and she's like, no. And I'm like, all right, like, you're going to see one day. So I just keep it kind of light. I don't like to be confrontational with people. It's an uncomfortable enough topic. We don't need to add more fuel to the fire.
That's very gracious of you.
Well, it is gracious of you. And that's why what I really want to know is what do you wish you could say to people if you were confrontational? What do you wish you could say to people? What do they really need to hear?
I wish they could not necessarily like hear it, but see it. And I think that's what I'm trying to do through MINDFIRE is make it as visual as possible. Like something Susanna said, like when I was talking about my exposure therapy with my parents and she felt like she could see herself in the room, like that really hit home for me because that's exactly what I wanted to do. I want people to read this and feel like they're in the room as it's going on. So I don't wish I could tell anyone that, but I wish they could kind of get a glimpse inside of that MINDFIRE and see it for a second. And that's what I'm trying to do in the book.
You are doing that with the book. This is wonderful. I just thank you so much for, bearing your soul for the benefit of others and for the benefit of yourself, truly. But thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you guys for reading. I love hearing what people thought of the book. I feel like I put it out in the universe and I'm just like on my phone, like waiting, like, what do people think? What are they going to say?
Yes. I think you're going to hear the effects for years and decades to come. Do you know what I mean? That the stories will come out of, oh my goodness, and I read this right before my child was diagnosed. Whatever it is, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I believe that.
Thank you. It's just a matter of getting it out there and getting it into as many hands as possible. I tell everyone this was purely philanthropic for me. Like I'm not monetizing the book at all, not making a single penny off of it. I literally just wanted to do this because I'm so passionate about it. And I feel like it's a lot of things that need to be heard right now in the society we're living in, where mental health is just so prominent.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the good questions.
Well, this has been such a pleasure, Carrie. We thank you so much for your time. We thank you for your heart. We thank you for such a rich conversation. And we wish you the best of luck with this book. If you come to LA, we'd be happy to put on a little something for you. So let us know.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. This was so great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening today. Do us a favor and leave us a review and a rating so that this podcast can get into the ears and the hearts of more and more moms. Did you know that Brave Together podcast is an extension of our nonprofit organization, We Are Brave Together? We Are Brave Together serves an international community of caregiving moms, offering support groups that are virtual and in-person, educational resources, and low-cost weekend retreats. And we have published our first anthology of caregiving stories entitled Becoming Brave Together, Heroic, Extraordinary Caregiving Stories from Mothers Hidden in Plain Sight. It will encourage and validate every parent caregiver. To join us today, go to wearebravetogether.org. Our support and sisterhood awaits you. Brave Together podcast is for entertainment and education purposes only. It's not a substitute for professional care and should not be relied on for medical or mental health advice. The use of any content on our podcast, links, show notes, or on our website is to be done at your own personal risk. Please seek out a professional to assess your own medical or mental health concerns, because we are all beautifully complex and the content of this podcast is for a broad audience.